welcome along to this week's RTÉ Soccer Podcast. I'm Raf Diallo, joined by Anthony Pyne and Ed Leahy this week. The interview this week is going to be with football journalist Michael Walker. I was chatting to him a little bit earlier on. He wrote a piece for The Athletic, which is around Brexit's impact on young Irish footballers and why more are heading for the continent. So that's coming up in a little while, but before that, it's been a busy week in terms of transfers. There's been deadline day, of course, but before we get to some of the moves involving some of Stephen Kenny's squad, we wanted to touch on a member of Vera Pauw's squad who has just joined Manchester United, Diane Caldwell. Anthony, obviously an exciting move for her, especially given the fact she has supported United for her entire life.
Yeah, it is. And the images that came out, I think Manchester United's women's Twitter account released really good photos from her coming to Old Trafford and getting a look at the stadium. And you can see in her face, it must have been really a surreal moment for Diane Caldwell, because she grew up a diehard Manchester United fan. Like, Diane would have played football with boys growing up. There probably wasn't that many girls teams, if any, around at that time, and there was no Manchester United women's team until very recently. So it couldn't have even been an aspiration for her or a dream to play for Manchester United. It just wasn't possible when she was a kid. So for her to get there now today, it must have been a really special moment for her, and we know it is because she said so herself. She's also coming into a pretty decent team. Like, they're well placed in the Women's Super League. They've still got an outside chance of actually winning the league. So she's coming in at a good time. And it's a great move for her. And she'd be a really good addition to them too, because, you know, as we know, she's a very solid defender. She's had a really interesting and very well-traveled career. So yeah, it's a great moment for her.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be chatting to her in the next couple of weeks. Ed, you and myself, we were both working deadline day. And of course, there were a few moves that just happened right at the very end, actually after the deadline, that were confirmed, which was Jamie Mcgrath going to Wigan and then Jeff Hendrick going to QPR. Maybe on Hendrick first, Ed. He's obviously, like, he didn't really have much of a role left at Newcastle given the trajectory that they're on, but where QPR at as a promotion chaser in the Championship, it's obviously a fairly exciting move for him.
Yeah, look, I suppose we'll just to touch on Diane's move to United first. I think it's a great move for her, specifically from an international perspective. You get the impression that maybe Diane's place is under threat in Vera's selection. You know, herself and Louise are very similar, but they actually work really well together. And I think Vera's tried to sort of break it up a little bit, but I think she sort of realised as well how important their partnership is. So Diane needs to be playing regularly to convince or to remain, I think, in Vera's starting 11, because she's tried to bring in maybe Savannah McCarthy into mix that up a bit at the back, but she's a threat at the not only at the back, but she's a threat going forward. She's a real target for set pieces, and she's tough as nails, and she throws herself at everything. Like Louise, they're just two great players to have in the Ireland setup at the moment. I think the United fans will really appreciate her, and for someone like her who's come, you know, she's travelled the world playing football, because that, you know, she's loving it. She's loving every experience that she's taken there. She's taken the experiences from everywhere she goes, and she's really now, I think, a couple of years left in her to really impress in the English top league, which would be great, you know. But I suppose, yeah, well, the transfer has been a busy week in that sense from the transfer point of view. And God, yeah, we weren't sure if Jeff was going to get away in the end, were we? Like, I suppose there's only so much you can take of being called a poor man's John Joe Shelby, you know. Like, if he's keeping you out of the team in Newcastle, and I like Shelby to a certain extent. I like what he brings. I think Jeff is a similar type of player, but I think Jeff will need to tap into what he did in the Ireland team and bring that to Loftus Road. He can really add a little bit to that QPR midfield, a little bit of composure, a bit of experience, and he will drive them forward. I think, you know, the way he's doing with Stephen's team now, maybe sitting in that little pocket in front of the defence and really, you know, drive the team on. And hopefully he gets a good run in the team now. And, like, you know, with Jimmy Dunn sitting behind him playing excellent football as well. It's exciting to be a Hoops fan, I suppose, at the moment, and keep an eye on the Hoops for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and Jamie Mcgraw also, I think it was just minutes before the Jeff Hendrick move was confirmed. We found out he was going to Wigan because, again, the entire transfer window, we'd been waiting on a move for him. And where was he going to go after St Mirren? Aberdeen, he'd been linked with, and then there were clubs in the Championship. And then finally, it's League One with Wigan. But again, people might look at it and think that's a strange move. But of course, they're upwardly mobile, and they've about 3 games in hand on Rotherham. They're second in League One, so it seems like he will be playing Championship football next season.
You would think that for sure. Like again, Jamie's, as manager said, his head's been turned during the transfer window, and like I don't know what. Like, I don't know the advice he's getting, or what sort of, was he waiting on bigger clubs to come in? Because he just kept hearing about stuff like Hibs and stuff, which could essentially be a sideways move from St Mirren in his current scenario. It might be an unpopular opinion, but I don't think we've seen the best of Jamie in the green shirt yet. I think he's done well since he's come in, and he came in extraordinary circumstances into Stephen Kenny's team. He probably wasn't expected to be elevated that quickly. He's better than his performances have been in the green jersey, I think. And it'll be interesting to see him playing in a strong winning team like Wigan. And that's what they are. They are going to be more than likely playing Championship football next year. And someone like him can really have a positive impact in a team that's winning, because we'll see the best of him, I think, in that sense. And hopefully then that will spill into March. By the time the international games come along, he'll have the confidence to have a bit more belief when he puts on the green jersey, I think.
Yeah, and of course he name-checked James Mclean, who he said rang him many times in order to try and get, just to give him, I suppose, a bit of information about the club, make sure he's going to be welcomed. I suppose, Anthony, if we look at James Mclean's experience since he's gone back to Wigan, it seems to have done him wonders, and we've kind of seen the benefit of that in an Ireland shirt, especially in the last year or so. Yeah,
no, Ed makes a really good point that this could turn out to be a very smart move from Jamie Mcgrath. And to go back to Jeff Hendrick has been, and it's not his own fault, obviously, but because of the new ownership at Newcastle, he's seen as an emblem of the past, of the Steve Bruce era, an uninspiring signing from the Newcastle fans' point of view. And it's he hasn't got a lot of respect there, so he definitely needed to get out. I mean, there was a danger he wasn't going to be in their revised Premier League squad, because they brought in Guimaraes, the big sign in the window. So he absolutely had to get out. But Jeff Hendrick has played more games in his career in the Championship than he has in the Premier League, from his time at Derby County. And if you think of Jeff back then, the type of player that he was, and into Euro 2016, he was creative, and he had vision, and he took risks in the same way that Jamie Mcgrath is capable of, and we've seen Jamie Mcgrath do. And a move to Wigan in League One, that's a big deal for Wigan to get him. They're really excited about bringing him on board. So he's going to go in as the main man into that team, and he's going to be emboldened. And you hope that he can kick on and express himself and play the way he's capable. And you'd hope that Jeff Hendrick, in stepping back to the Championship, can do the same, because we've seen flashes of it towards the tail end of the Ireland campaign against Luxembourg and Portugal. There was a pass he played against Luxembourg for one of the goals that was really, really brilliant pass. If you remember, he just great vision, the type of pass that a lot of players don't see. That people forget that that's what Jeff Hendrick can bring to the table. Like, I think as he's got older, and because it's so difficult to have a prolonged career in the Premier League, I think Jeff Hendrick has got a little bit conservative over the years. He plays within himself, and that doesn't suit him. You need him to be confident enough to take risks and to try different things, which I think Stephen Kenny has done a good job in starting to bring that out in him, and he's all the better for it. So for both of those players, we hope that this will benefit them in that way, that it will embolden them to be confident and to express themselves, to take risks on the pitch, and to be creative, because they're both very capable of it.
Yeah, and closer to home, of course, there have been some moves among the League of Ireland clubs. There's Stephen Bradley joining Dundalk, of course. Just to clarify, that is not the Shamrock Rovers head coach suddenly making a move over to Dundalk. This is Stephen Bradley with a V moving on loan from Hibs, and off the back of a couple of Welsh under-21 internationals moving. Again, some interesting moves from Dundalk. Anthony.
Yeah, the Bradley one kind of reminds me a few years ago that around the time the US elections, where Trump beaten headlines were getting loads of traffic in the sports sections. Judd Trump was playing in the snooker at the time. Stephen Bradley, I don't know a huge amount about this lad, Raf, to be honest with you, but it's interesting. His quotes were interesting because he talked about some of the League of Ireland players who've come to Scotland and done well. I think he mentioned Daryl Horgan and Jamie McGrath. And it shows you kind of that the League of Ireland's reputation as a place where players like himself can go and get football in a competitive environment and then come back stronger for it. You know, he's well thought of. He must be well thought of Hibs because they've given him a pretty good contract recently enough. So he seems, just from what was said of him after the move, he seems to be a kind of attacking, exciting player. I don't know. I haven't seen him, but we'll see. It's another acquisition for Dundalk, and this is what makes the start of a League of Ireland season exciting. Like, there tends to be a lot of new faces on a lot of teams. It's a clean slate, and we'll see. It's going to be very interesting to see how Stephen O'Donnell makes it all gel and click, and if he can, because this is shaping up to be a very, very competitive season this year. Obviously, Dundalk will want to be getting back in the mix, but they're not just competing with Shamrock Rovers. I think St. Pat's and Derry City might have more of a say this year. So, yeah, it's exciting year ahead.
Yeah, and Derry City specifically also have signed Matty Smith from Pats, and Ed, I suppose, with all the other signings they have made, especially those who have kind of returned, like Michael Duffy and Patrick McElhenney, it just kind of bolsters that idea that there is something exciting burgeoning there. Whether it comes together, we'll only find out in due course.
This is it, yeah. God, when you look at the players who've left St. Pat's, you worry for them a little bit, that they're back in, they're going, all the progress they made last season, and they're going back again really to rebuild and go again. Like, Dundalk to say they're in a rebuild. And you'd sort of wonder about how competitive the league will be. Like, from Shamrock Rovers' point of view, they're pretty settled going into this campaign, and you'd have to think they'd be probably stronger favourites this year, even going into it. Be interesting to see how Sligo maintain the season this year. But yeah, I think you're right, Raf, that Derry is the team that everyone is looking at to really put it up to the Rovers this year, because they have out of all the teams, they've got that bit of continuity and momentum from the end of last season that they could bring into this season. Yeah, I think they're doing a great job up there, and I think when you see some of the players they've brought back, experienced players, and if they can make the Brandywell back into that fortress, and get their home form, if they can get their home form strong, and then obviously they have a lot of traveling to do around the country, but a big strong Brandywell will stop the other teams from coming and taking the points there. So they'll be the ones to watch, and they've definitely got the most interesting squad that could challenge, I think. Yeah,
and I think maybe added, it's the fact that these are players who are coming back, so the adaptation process is not going to be quite as long as somebody maybe who doesn't know the area or doesn't know the club. These are locals who have past history as well.
Yeah, and that's what you say, and the local element is huge up in Derry, because when they get going, like Sligo, it becomes that one team town which is the envy of the Dublin clubs. When Cork went on their run, that was one thing that they had, the one team town. Sligo, when they get going, they get the whole town. Like, you walk around Sligo and it's just football, Rovers, and that's all it is. It's the same in Derry, and when the Brandywell gets going, it's a horrible place to go to as an away team.
Yeah, and Anthony, another move that just happened in the last few days, of course, as well. Jordan Flores returning to the League of Ireland, going to Bows, and he's just arrived from Northampton Town. Of course, past history, there was that viral clip back in, I think, the start of the 2020 season when he scored an absolute worldie against Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah, he's had a tough time though at Northampton. Like, he wasn't playing; they cancelled his contract, so Bows have brought him back, and Ed talks about continuity and momentum, which is the exact opposite of what Bohemians have this year. Again, they have to rebuild. They brought in Flores. Twardek is a good signing for them. Junior, Ryan Cassidy, the young player from Watford. So this is another big challenge for Keith Long to try and rebuild again, and I'm sure they'll probably blood a couple of young players that they always seem to. They've got a really good conveyor belt there, and seem to be very good at developing good young players. Jamie Mullen is a very nice footballer that's well thought of there. So, and actually, it looks like they've done quite well to hold on to him, because there was talk that he might be on the way, or who knows, in the summer maybe he still will. But it's another big challenge for Bowles. We've seen Keith Long do it for the last few seasons, but it never gets any easier. But we'll see. We'll see. It's very hard to predict at this point, isn't it? Like, as Ed talking about Derry, where St. Pat's, I think St. Pat's are going to have a good year, but it is true to say there's a lot of variables. Like, they have a new manager, they have a lot of new faces, so it is quite hard to predict. And also, like, the momentum of the cup, they could barely, the dust had barely settled on that cup win before all that happened with the manager leaving, and left a bit of a sour taste. But as I said, like, it remains to be seen. I do feel sorry for Bowles in the way that they've been stripped again over the winter, but it looks like they've made some smart acquisitions. And as you say, like, the likes of Flores, who knows the league, and maybe just a little bit of a wiser head in the dressing room to help any young players that will be coming through, will be important for them this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned young players there, and I suppose it fits into the theme of the interview with Michael Walker that we're about to bring you, in terms of the impact of Brexit and how it's kind of closed down the pathway for players who are in and around 16 going to England, but now going further afield. And Cathal Heffernan, of course, going to AC Milan. Ed, I mean, this had been in the works for a while, but obviously confirmed a couple of days ago. So this could be potentially huge, depending on how he develops. And even if it doesn't end up going to into the Milan first team at some point down the line, the football education he's going to get is going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, look, we're all getting very excited seeing Irish players sign for Italian clubs. But let's not get carried away. It's probably just the equivalent of 16, 17-year-olds joining Man United and Liverpool 10 years ago. Like, we always do keep an eye on, when the players went to, United or Liverpool, your Mark Kennys, your Desi Bakers, all these lads who were there knocking on the door of making it, but didn't make it, came back and stuff. Kevin Zeffi is another who's gone to Inter Milan, real prospect, him. And I suppose a Banquet of the three who've gone to Italy is probably that bit more advanced in his career at the moment. I suppose it just needs one of them to do well early, and suddenly you'll get more clubs coming knocking. But it's a great move for these lads. It's not just from a footballing perspective, but from a lifestyle perspective and a life experience. It's not your cliche move to the English lower leagues, staying in digs, getting involved in that sort of English football culture. And we've just seen so many heartbreaking stories of players who've come back from that absolutely disillusioned with the game. In Italy, you'd like to think it's an education in football as well. It's part of, it's a different sort of approach. You remember even when the likes of Beckham went there in the later years, how he learned, about their approach to the game, to training, to diet. Obviously, the English game has evolved hugely over the last 10 years, 20 years. But it's nice for them to go maybe learn a new language, and play football at in a different style. And it's suiting this new generation of Irish players who are coming through with that emphasis on possession and the emphasis on playing out from the back and holding on to the ball. And that can only be good for Irish football. Even if these lads come back in 2 or 3 years and they're coming back with that added experience, it can only benefit Irish football as a whole.
Yeah, and just before we bring you the interview with Michael Walker, Cathal Heffernan was speaking to Tony O'Donoghue, our soccer correspondent here at RTÉ, and just before the move was confirmed, and also his father and mother, who are both Olympians, Rob and Marion, were also speaking. So here's a clip from that, and then the interview with Michael Walker, the football journalist, who's written a really interesting article on this subject for The Athletic.
At times it just doesn't even feel real. Like it's a dream. Like for me, you know, and hopefully, like I'm just raring to get started now.
I think he'll do really well, like because he's gone through a lot in the last couple of years, and he's progressed really well internationally. He's been on a lot of trials. The Brexit thing was obviously a big blow at the time. So with Stephen Ireland's help, getting contacts in Europe and being to them clubs, and a lot of them came really close, and he's gone through a lot of disappointments as well.
All right, Michael, thanks a million for taking the time to chat to me. Your piece in The Athletic, it's titled "Brexit Denies Irish Youngsters a Clear Path to English Football, but They Have New Options," which perfectly encapsulates the topic we're going to talk about now. You talked to a lot of different voices in the article, and one of them is Ger O'Brien, who is an important figure in terms of the overseeing of the academy at St. Patrick's Athletic, and he makes an interesting observation to you that it's not so much scouts coming over to Ireland in greater numbers from Europe that's leading to this, the number of players heading over to the continent. It seems to be a case that it's a lot more agents and intermediaries being involved.
Yes, well, that's his experience. So I would take him at his word. And I think that in general, not just in Ireland, but in the UK and in Europe, the rush to sign players at a young age we thought it was probably pretty fast 20 years ago, but it's just accelerated. And so there is this constant desire to get the best 14-year-old, the best 12-year-old, and you hear even younger. So that phenomenon may not have existed in Ireland until Brexit, but it's certainly there now, and that puts it in line with the UK and the rest of Europe, and those networks will only grow, you would imagine, as time goes on, and I mean, we've seen an immediate impact of Brexit, but over years it'll be interesting to see if it evolves into really strong networks, large networks, and different structures.
Yeah, and as I think Ger O'Brien said it to you, Glory Nzingo, one of the players that has moved in the last couple of years, and he's gone to Stade Rennes in France. I mean, he's with a massive agency like Wasserman, who, if you're involved in football media or whatever, we would all be sort of familiar with those. So it is opening doors further afield.
Oh yeah. I mean, their contacts are Europe-wide and worldwide. So that's they will identify the best young boys, as will lots of similar agencies will identify the best young boys. It's no longer just Home Farm doing it, or Cherry Orchard doing it. You've got these organizations doing it, and there's money in it, and that's why they're doing it. And historically, Glory Nzingo would have gone to Man United or Liverpool probably, and but now they have contacts abroad, and they can facilitate it, and it's just an easier bureaucratic path, So it may be that he comes back to comes into UK football aged 18. We have to see that, Again, we are in the earliest of days, so it's hard to tell exactly, but we may get the buying of clubs. This multi-club model may sort of take effect, and so you may get players parked, to use the phrase, in Belgium or wherever. Until they're 18, and then brought across to England. So, for example, if Brighton wanted to sign a very good 16-year-old Irish boy, they might allow that. They might facilitate his move to their club in Belgium, and then at 18 he comes back into Brighton. Now, the legality of all that is, you'd have to be tested, I think.
Yeah, and as you said, Brexit has been the thing that has played the biggest impact in leading to this surge of players. And even this week, Cathal Heffernan, who you mentioned in the piece, he'd been on trial across different places in Europe, including Italy, has now signed for AC Milan. And his dad was speaking to our soccer correspondent, Tony O'Donoghue, and mentioned that, well, his dad, of course, who's a well-known Olympian, as is his mother, but Rob Heffernan referenced that the Brexit restrictions and how they'd come in had been a bit of a blow for their son in regards to trying to get a move across. But of course, then he mentioned Stephen Ireland, who's also from Cork, who's involved in the football agency world now, and he's opening doors to the continent.
Yeah, that's definitely what's going on, and someone like Stephen Ireland, given his several clubs in England, he'll have just made lots of contacts, and that will, if he's able to ring, a prominent Italian and say, look, there's a 16-year-old Irish boy you should be looking at, then those clubs are going to take the chance, because it's not. I can't imagine it's an absolutely vast commitment financially for AC Milan. So what they offer Inter Milan with Kevin Zeffy, so you just sort of think it's worth taking a chance. I mean, you hear that a lot. It's worth taking a punt, and so I think as long as the Irish boys' welfare is looked after, then these are really interesting moves, and it's a really interesting education that they're going to get. It's going to be a different education from your traditional English academy education. So I think it's really interesting and pretty exciting. The idea of going to PSV Eindhoven at 16 to me seems as interesting as going to Everton. So and it might actually suit the style of play, and it might suit the boys in terms of the competitive environment might be slightly less, and that might make it easier. I think we expect far too much of boys at 16. We really do, at physical level and at emotional level. And I think one of the best things about Brexit has been the number of boys who are staying, and I think it's really good for them, good for the family, good for League of Ireland clubs, and hopefully then they can go across if they want to, whenever they're more mature physically and mentally and emotionally, and they can make more of an impact and enjoy it more, because even if you go across at 24, you can still get 10 years out of it. You don't have to go across at 16. There's this kind of rush that there's always been, and I think this pauses that, and hopefully will have a beneficial effect on Irish boys.
Yeah, it actually tallies with something. I was interviewing Jim Goodwin, the St Mirren manager, back in October last year, and he has a load of Irish players on his books over there. Jamie Mcgrath has just left, who we would have brought over from Dundalk. And specifically about Jamie Mcgrath, he was talking about how he would rather sign a player from the League of Ireland with 50 to 100 games behind him, and specifically senior games, rather than somebody who's gone through a Premier League academy, has only played under 23 football. So that really ties in to Killian Phillips, who you mentioned in your piece, who was signed by Crystal Palace from Drogheda United at the age of 19, because of course once he's over 18, the common travel area allows him to move over to England without the restrictions that another type of European footballer might have to adhere to.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen Killian Phillips play, but I'm told that at 16 he may not have been the standout boy, in Irish football. But by 19, he's developed into a different physical specimen, and mentally he's developed, and that is, I think that's proof. So I think that would be really good if he succeeds, because it would show that this demand to go at 16 has to be questioned and has to be looked at again. Just because it's always happened doesn't mean it's right. There are countless, there must be thousands, tens of thousands of Irish boys who've gone across at 16, 15, 16, 17 and have come home, and it hasn't worked. And I just think that if you can go across at 19, you think of the difference in all of us between being 16 and 19, how we think, how we behave, how we view the world. You know, it's a huge difference, and I think that could be really, really good for Irish football. I hope so anyway.
Yeah, and I guess at the same time as well, even if Brexit maybe had not happened, the fact that it's become harder even for English lads, let alone Irish players coming through academies, that in the long term players probably would have had to look at other options, because obviously, you know, you take clubs like Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester United, and probably the whole way down the way through the league, they're in a position where they tend to sign players from all over the world.
Yeah, and that will still happen, you know. So a change in law is a different thing between a change in a trend. Those are two different things. And a change in law means that people have to address the future differently. And if League of Ireland clubs can get some funding, some government funding, then they can address their facilities, their coaching levels, their numbers, their professionalism. And that will, again, over a period of time, that might take 5 years, might take 10 years. It might be 10 years where, people were writing articles about the benefit of with the articles called How Brexit Changed Irish Football for the Better, or whatever it is. But that would be dependent on sufficient funding coming in. So we just have to wait on seeing that and hope that the investment comes in. If it does, I think it can only be a good thing. I just think there's. I had to do a piece about non-league football in England and the incredible crowds that are being seen in what is the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th divisions of English football. And I think there might be a similar kind of buzz, I hope, around the restart of the League of Ireland. And if you get that kind of money through the turnstiles, that increased profile, increased enthusiasm, then you might get increased investment. And suddenly you have a turning point, and let's hope we're at it.
Yeah, and the other thing, it kind of ties into something we were just chatting about a couple of minutes ago, but in regards to the technical level of the players, of course, they're going to learn a different way of playing the game in different European countries, but even back home here, obviously the emphasis has changed because of the way the modern game has changed in regards to everything's going to be playing out from the back and everything. And I was just looking at the names that are like this wave of players that are young Irish players that are coming through, and myself and there was Emmet Malone from the Irish Times a few years ago. I think it was October 2018. We were invited over to Ireland under-15 training camp. So this was the first wave of players who were this is their first age grade and first involvement at international level. And I dug out the brochure there because I still had it, and some of the names are kind of jumping out. Evan Ferguson, who is over at Brighton now, of course, but he wasn't affected by the Brexit rule in the same way. Gloria Nzinga, who's mentioned in your piece, James Abankwah was on the standby list for that as well, and he's just gone to Udinese. So the fact that European clubs are also looking at Ireland, it must be also down to the fact that the players are operating on a higher technical level now with the change in the emphasis of the game.
I think they're operating on a different technical level. I don't know, we have to. It remains to be seen whether it's higher, because Ireland has always had very technical players. It's just, and this is something that's bothered me for a long, long time, is that the stereotype set by the Charlton years doesn't really reflect. It isn't a true reflection of the kind of football that Irish football has always produced, north and south of the border. Liam Brady, Johnny Giles, George Best, Danny Blanchflower. These, Robbie Keane, Roy Keane, I doubt if any of them were 6 foot. So this idea that Irish football has to be long ball headed to the big man, it just grew and grew, and I don't think it represented what Irish football really is. And I think that Stephen Kenny, what he is doing is he is a man of this moment and a man of this era, and I think that the kind of football that he's trying to play chimes with what is happening, but also what the boys want to play and what players want to play. They want to play they want to play Pep Guardiola football because it's interesting and it's enjoyable, and it isn't rigid. There's a fluidity to it, and I think I think that hopefully that kind of coaching that's going on and the different style of play will suit Irish boys, because you walk around the streets of Ireland, it isn't full of tall Dutchmen. It isn't like that. We need to think about the physique of players and the physique of people and what suits us, and that's, I would say, feet first football. And hopefully that will come as well. And so it's a coincidence of things. I think Stephen Kenny is a coincidence of his appointment is a coincidence. I'm not sure if that was wholly planned that he would chime with the times, but let's hope so.
Yeah, certainly. And the final point, and it's the sort of the final passage in your in your article in The Athletic. It's what you mentioned before, the finances and the hope that League of Ireland clubs can financially benefit if players are moving to to big clubs like AC Milan and others. And you mentioned the example of Seamus Coleman, of course, who moved over to Everton from Sligo Rovers for 60,000 many years ago. And we look at James Abankwah moving for 500k. But is there a sense of urgency from the people you've spoken to in regards to making sure that there are possibly contracts that can tie down the players, but also it means that if they are sold, there is a financial outlay there? And obviously the problem here is there's always been a sense of uncertainty within the league for certain clubs, particularly in terms of survival. So that might be difficult to do, to be able to offer those type of deals.
Well, that's the thing, is that the infrastructure isn't there, and there isn't an industry, as Gerald Bryan said, and as Stephen Kenny has said before, there isn't a football industry in Ireland. We have, there is the beginnings of one, but you can't have, clubs that are run by volunteers can't be expected to be professional. So they will take low fees. But that's what I mean. If there's investment goes into the clubs, then they can start employing professional people, and they can start then offering 52-week contracts, which will change, the contractual status of the players, and then they can ask for, proper compensation whenever there's transfers. So that then it becomes a virtuous circle then, and that then feeds up, and you just hope that keeps on going, because as it stands, 42-week contracts just don't, it helps players move in one sense, and it helps agents move them, but it doesn't really bring a lot of cash into the Irish football economy, and unfortunately that's what needs to change. There needs to be more investment.
Yeah. And we'll see how that develops over time.
Yeah. I may sound very optimistic.
Yeah, but we obviously have to set out what the future may possibly look like in the more utopian model. But you're of course, for anybody who wants to read your article, it's on The Athletic. Brexit denies Irish youngsters a clear path to English football, but they have new options. So Michael Walker, thanks a million for taking the time. And of course, anybody who wants to read some of your books, The Green Shoots is one I would certainly recommend anyway, personally.
Thanks very much, Ralph. Thanks for your time.
All right, that was the interview with Michael Walker. Ed and Anthony, thanks a mil for joining me this week. I suppose, as you said just before we brought the interview on, Ed, this sort of education that players are getting or will be getting when they go abroad, like, it's only going to benefit us, I suppose, in the long term. And as he kind of mentioned, as Michael mentioned in the piece, in regards, Stephen Kenny has sort of been appointed at a coincidental time where we're kind of moving in this direction.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's been there. Credit to the FAI, they've been working on this for a while now, since Ruth Doctor came over, and all sorts of things have been put in place to try and get all teams playing the same way and getting that sort of football and philosophy built into them from that young age. And Stephen Kenny's the right man to do it. And you'll see more and more of these transfers, won't you? You'll see it. And even the lads who are going to England now, when they're a bit older, they're suddenly going straight into good football sides, and they're showing that they've already got the education that they need to make a good career out of for a good footballing career for the rest of their life, I suppose.
Yeah, because actually, as I said it to Michael in the interview, there was something that kind of sparked a memory when we were kind of talking about the way Irish football is being developed now. I remember the FAI invited a few journalists to an Ireland under-15 training camp, and this was back in 2018. And I stood the brochure from the thing because I went down. There was Emmett Malone from the Irish Times there, I think a couple of others as well. And some of the names jump out. Evan Ferguson was there, I think, with obviously the parents were there too, but Evan Ferguson was in that squad. James Abankwah was on that standby list. And then Nzingo, who's at Stade Rem as well, was another who was also involved there. So we were actually just seeing the first fruits of that. And of course, Jason Donoghue, who's the Ireland under-15 head coach, that was kind of what he was instilling as well, just even watching some of the training from the side of the pitch, just that thing of splitting the centre halves, playing out from the back, playing patient football. And we're only starting to see, I suppose, the fruits of that, Anthony.
Yeah, I think the other side of this, although it's great to see, and I agree with everything Ed said there, but from the Irish club's point of view, there's the danger that, the scouts from France, Germany, Italy, Spain, they will be all over the Irish underage game now, because there's a potential for obviously talented young players, but also really, really cheap, peanuts. And the challenge now is for Irish clubs, can they tie down the best of their prospects, identify them at 15, 16, and tie them down to 4-year deals, so that if they lose them, if they are cherry picked, that they get compensated for having developed them for a few years and put a hell of a lot of work into them. St. Pat's with Abankwah sort of took a bit of a stance with Udinese over that sale, and reports are that they got a good deal. They got, I think it's upwards of €1 million for him. And that's only right, that's only right and proper. So this is the duality of the whole situation, is that on one hand, it's a brilliant opportunity for young Irish players, and we hope that we see the fruits of it in the international teams in the years to come. But also, can Irish clubs nail down an infrastructure where they can start to reap the rewards of this and have tangible financial rewards that can then get pumped back into the game, and you start to generate a bit of an industry really for the first time. There's a lot at stake here. It's a big, big opportunity, and that's the thing that we'll see over the coming years. But it is good to see these moves, and it's a great opportunity. And I remember speaking to Ryan Nolan a couple of years ago, a fella from Clare who was at Inter Milan, which was unusual. Even only 2 or 3 years ago, it was highly unusual. His family had moved to Spain when he was a kid, and he'd been picked up by a scout in Spain and ended up in Inter Milan. Now he's at Getafe now. I think he's playing with Getafe's B team, so it didn't work out from Inter Milan, but he has 3 languages. He's traveled all around Europe getting a football education and a formal education, and if nothing else, it's a brilliant life experience. And you could tell by talking to this chap at 19, he was so rounded and mature. So it's all positive for them. But as I said, we hope that we see that it comes full circle, and there's a benefit for Irish football, grassroots football here, and Irish League of Ireland football here from this.
Yeah, and actually, as you mentioned, some of these young players kind of being very well-rounded and being able to kind of talk about football in the right way. I mean, James Abankwah, I was just watching him last week, just after the move was confirmed, chatting to Jamie from St. Pat's just about that move, about everything everything he was expecting when going to Italy, and just came across very mature. And the same thing with Cathal Heffernan when he was chatting to Tony as well. I mean, I don't know how I would have come across at 16, 17. If you stick a microphone and a camera in my face, would have started screaming and running away in another direction probably. But it's very noticeable, and they're not the only ones. It seems to be just across the board. They just come across that way.
You only have to look at him play, Raf. He came on in the cup final off the bench, 17 at the time, in a game on a knife edge, nearly 40,000 people at Aviva, and he was extremely impressive. I mean, that's a gauge of a player's temperament, not just ability, but temperament. How can they handle pressure situations? He was immaculate when he came on, absolutely brilliant. You hear the likes of Gavin Bazunu speak, or Queven Keller. They're very, very similar, you know, mature, composed, articulate, impressive young guys. Like, so, yeah, I don't know if that's just, is that an individual thing, or is it a signifier of their wider development at clubs now? I'm not really sure. I couldn't answer that, but for sure those individuals are particularly impressive.
Yeah, but anyway, I think that brings us up for this week. Hopefully next week we'll be chatting to Diane Caldwell. As we mentioned at the start, she's just made the move to Manchester United, who she's supported her entire life. But Ed and Anthony, thanks a million for taking the time this week, and we'll be back next week.